Star Trek vs. Star Wars: The Imperial War by Darius Trent. Chapter 3. Discovery, I'm too old for this. Defending Montgomery Scott as he crawled through one of the USS Discovery's Jefferies tubes. The technically 158-year-old retired Starfleet engineer had been asked by his friend Jean-Luc Picard, commanding officer of the Enterprise, to help the Discovery out of the predicament it was now in. He had conferred with the crew of the ship which had come forward in time with the ship, and it was Michael Burnham, the de facto first officer of the ship, who suggested he help with getting on the ship. "Just keep calm, we're almost there," called out Lieutenant Commander Stamets from behind him. Stamets, a human with tardigrade DNA integrated into him, was the only person capable of piloting the Discovery's Spore drive system, and needed to be on board in order to activate the drive. Scott breathed a sigh of relief as he looked sideways to what looked to be the engineering room of the Discovery. "We're here, lady." He carefully opened the small door to get inside, allowing him and Stamets to crawl out and into main engineering. "All right, I'll get to work here," commented Stamets as he walked up to the warp core, setting up some equipment by the controls at the front of the horizontal core. "You head to the bridge and secure the rest of the ship." "Yes, laddie," Scott replied as he pulled a small hand phaser from his belt. "I'll be sure no one else is here." He attached a small device to the door controls, forcing the doors open and giving him access to the rest of the darkly lit ship. As he made his way through the dimly lit corridors of the Crossfield-class ship, he felt as if he were being watched somehow. As he walked up to the turbo lift shaft that led onto the bridge, he swore he saw another light behind him, turning around to see nothing behind him. After a period where he climbed up and through lift shafts, he finally found himself at the bridge, where he immediately set up at one of the consoles to the right of the command chair. He pulled out a small mid-23rd century communicator out of his pocket. As Starfleet would be able to intercept an ordinary combadge transmission, the Discovery crew had decided to use their communicators, as they operated on a different set of frequencies which Starfleet no longer monitored constantly. He flipped it open, reminding him of the communicators he used back when he was on the Constitution-class Enterprise. "Scott to Stamets," whispered Scott through the communicator, "I'm at the bridge, ready to silently power up the ship." "Are you sure?" asked Stamets through the communicator. "Because from the looks of it, main engineering just powered on silently." Scott looked around him. Sure enough, consoles started coming to life, flickering on with a blue interface contrasting to the bronze color of the ship. "I didn't do it," remarked Scott as he made sure no one could see the lights inside Discovery power up by covering the windows with blast shields. "Then who did?" queried Stamets. "I did," announced a female voice through the communicator, startling Scott. "Who are ye and what are ye doing here?" bewilderedly asked Scott. "I am Zora," replied the voice, "and I am the USS Discovery's computer. You register as Lieutenant Montgomery Scott, Junior Engineer under Chief Engineer Max Louvier on the USS Enterprise NCC 1701. Scott briefly thought back to the days when he wasn't Chief Engineer of the Enterprise, and having to suppress all knowledge of the existence of Discovery when he was but a junior engineer. It greatly saddened him, as he had to lie and say that the Discovery and her crew had been the first he'd seen die in battle, before being forced to not speak about her again. He had wondered about her fate for years, before refocusing on his work and becoming Chief Engineer of the Enterprise. "I dinna think that Starfleet had intelligent AIs on Discovery when it was built," commented Scott as he looked around him, searching for the source of Zora's voice. "I am the end result of the aggressive AI known as Control fighting against Discovery's computer as it tried to survive outside of Leland. Control attempted to invade Discovery's computer systems as a source of refuge. As a result, I was created by the AI created by the sphere data to get rid of Control." "And I can assume Control has been purged from the ship?" asked Scott. "I can assure you that Control is not in the ship's systems at any point." "Say, are you familiar with current events?" queried Scott as he started to tinker with the tactical console. "I am aware that Starfleet intends on decommissioning Discovery," answered Zora. "However, the sphere data insists that Discovery is the safest place for the data. In anticipation of any deconstructive efforts to the ship, I have beamed aboard 20 transphasic torpedoes, and added the components necessary to build more to the cargo hold." "Well, alas, we're getting you out of here," remarked Scott. "Me and her crew are going to get you someplace where you'll be useful." We will have to try to disable the dock's security sensors before we escape, as well as repair the shield generators and the hull for mycelial transit. I would also recommend an upgrade to the phasers, in case we need to defend ourselves. Well then, commented Scott, let's get started. In space, the USS Hotspur moved forwards. The Hotspur, a Miranda class, has been in service for more than a century, and had long since shown its age. During one of the earliest engagements with the Cardassians, the Hotspur had led a small attack force of 3 other Miranda-class ships in an attack on 3 Cardassians Galore-class ships invading a colony on Minos Corva. All the ships but the Hotspur were destroyed, and it wasn't until the arrival of the USS Gandhi, one of the newer Ambassador-class ships, where the Cardassians' force was completely dispatched. Ever since then, the Hotspur has been assigned to non-combat duties, trudging along in the Sierra sector as it waited for something to happen. That something had happened. With the outbreak of the Imperial invasion, and Starfleet's seemingly ignorant perspective on the conflict, the Hotspur was called in by Admiral Picard as part of a squad of 10 ships to defend the Federation while Starfleet was on its knees in the Federation Council. It had been assigned the relatively important role of stopping Imperial probes from going further into Federation space, but this number kept on increasing, to the point where the targeting computer would eventually be unable to target and destroy all the probes. It had thus requested reinforcement for its mission, reinforcements it would now be getting. The USS Arizona dropped out of warp in front of the Hotspur, as well as the USS Destiny and the USS Olympus. These ships, sent by Admiral Picard to help the Hotspur, now conferred with it as to what they should do now. "Greeting Captain SoDo," greeted Trent from the bridge of the Arizona. On the screen in front of him were 3 faces, separated by LCARS borders, the faces of Captains Mercer, Archer and SoDo. "It's good to see you too," replied SoDo. "You don't know how desperately we needed you here." "Relax, Captain, we've got your back," comforted Captain Mercer on the Olympus. "Can you tell us where we need to go, or something like that?" "We've got probes popping up in the Rua, Zirchin and Omicron systems," answered SoDo. "At least that's where they usually pop up. We often find probe activity outside them, but the probes usually choose those systems as a sort of bearings finder before they move on deeper into Federation space." "Well, the Destiny can take the Omicron sector," proposed Captain Archer on the Destiny. "The Olympus can take the Maxia sector and the Arizona can go with you and coordinate our efforts." "That sounds good for us," replied Mercer. "It'll give us time to recalibrate the Lance phaser and work on that precision cutting mode my chief engineer suggested." "Why are you so obsessed with that Lance phaser?" jokingly asked Trent. "Honestly, all the time you're like, Lance phaser this, Lance phaser that." "I told you, I like blowing things up," answered Mercer with a smile. "Regardless of which, we should be off to our respective sectors, shouldn't we?" proposed Trent. "He's right, you know," added SoDo. "The more time we spend here, the more chance there is for Imperial probes to slip by and go deeper into Federation space." "Very well then," replied Mercer. "We'll be off now. Olympus out." "Same here," ended Archer. "Destiny out." The entire transmission ended, returning the viewscreen to the view of the Hotspur facing them. "Captain, both the Olympus and the Destiny just went to warp to their respective sectors," announced Hawk at the helm. "Taytoner, Organa, start to coordinate with the Hotspur's tactical on probe positions and firing solutions," ordered Trent. "Hawk, put us in parallel course and speed with the Hotspur." "Aye, sir," replied Taytoner. Ensign Organa moved from her workstation at the back to the tactical console behind Trent, standing next to Taytoner. "Moving into parallel course," announced Hawk as the ship slowly lurched to align its course with that of the Hotspur. In space, the Arizona further forwards on impulse power. On its left, the USS Hotspur moved at the same speed as it, in the same direction as both ships began working together to figure out the locations of probes and their most likely destinations.